Chapter 316 Spirit Domain. In the Peach Spirit Castle. Looking around, they were mesmerized. It was a place full of trees of different colors. Flowers of different sorts, herbs that they didn't know of. Butterflies and beautiful little fairies flew around, tending to the land. Concentrated mana rivaling that of the city of Arcana. The place was teeming with beauty that they thought they were in another world. This castle is so beautiful. Suddenly, from afar, they saw an eye-catching wonder of the world. An ancient castle full of history and beauty occupied millions of square meters. Looking at the place, this was probably the most beautiful place where an apex sovereign resided. As they walked, a group of little flower fairies approached them.
Sister Lila! Sister Lila! Sister Lila! It's you, little fairies.
You're as cute as always. Lila smiled and played with them. Did you come here to meet Sister Lilith and Empress Freya?
Yes, can you take us to them?
Then follow us, we'll take you to them. Soon, they followed the little fairies as they beheld a variety of stunning landscapes. Peach Spirit Castle Training Area.
Good. Stay in position and concentrate.
Freya ordered, holding a Tier 9 spirit item. Before her was Lilith, drawn with various suppression arrays. As Lilith sweated and trembled, Freya flicked her with the Tier 9 spirit weapon. Don't be distracted. If you want to get out of here to hook up with that bastard, you better prepare yourself and train to death. Lilith wanted to answer, however, as soon as she opened her mouth. The Tier 9 spirit weapon came crashing down on her head. Although it didn't hurt, she felt her body shocked, like being reset, which is not a good feeling. All you think about is a man. You will not get far like that. Do you think I gained strength from idling and hooking up with others? I worked very hard for this achievement, with no distractions whatsoever. As Freya continued to scold Lilith, interfering with her mentality, Lila and the others arrived. Sister Freya.
Sister Lilith.
Lila yelled, running to them.
Baby Lila, you're here.
Freya's eyes lit up. Lilith was also distracted and broke her concentration.
Lila.
Asha.
Maya.
Lilith muttered in surprise. It had been decades since they last met up. Lilith had just heard that they had come to the abyss. She thought it would be hundreds or thousands of years before they met again. Who knew that they would return so quickly? Seeing them meant the others must be back, especially Maximus. Thinking of Maximus, she couldn't help but feel excited. It had been over 100 years since she last saw that man.
Day and night.
Year after year. No matter how many times her sister scolded her, that man's image didn't leave her mind. Sister Freya, Sister Lilith, I missed you too. Lila said, hugging them.
I missed you too.
Lilith replied, giving Lila a peck on the cheek. You're growing more and more beautiful. It seems that your trip in the abyss was a success, Freya praised, looking at Lila as if she were a work of art. Hee, I'm still not as beautiful as Sister Freya.
What a sweet mouth.
Freya said, pinching her cheeks.
And who are these sisters?
Freya asked, not excluding Asha and Maya. Although they didn't possess transcendent beauty like Lila, they were at least at the top of her beauty scale. These two are my nieces, Asha and Maya, Lilith hurriedly said, pulling them into a hug. Hello, Sister Freya, I'm Asha. Asha waved her hands, speaking as if she and Freya were close. What an energetic child, Freya said, patting Asha's head. I'm Maya, Lila's cousin. Maya presented herself with complete etiquette. Oh, what a cute and polite little girl, Freya couldn't help but smile seeing such a polite child. Although she already knew that this was that bastard seed, seeing their beauty, she couldn't help but smile. Freya can only say that her sister still had some taste. She still knew how to choose a handsome bastard. She could only imagine the cuteness of such a child if they gave birth to an offspring. Thinking of this, she was not so averted having Lilith hang out with that bastard anymore.
By the way, why did you have time to come here?
Although Freya was a homebody who only knew how to train. As an apex sovereign, she was still aware of the world's affairs. The cursed continent should be in chaos right now. Furthermore, according to her news channels, it seemed that the bastard who seduced her sister was missing. Sister, we have come to ask for your help, Lila said, holding Freya's hand coyly. No, I can't help you, Freya quickly shook her head. She was not foolish enough to interfere in ancient apex sovereign's territory. Furthermore, Doran had already informed them never to intervene with that land. She didn't know how much guts those gods had to interfere with the war on the cursed continent directly. Although it was only believers who fought and no gods were involved. If that person had a twitch in his head, no one could stop him from killing a few high gods. It's not that, sister. We only wanted to buy some material from you. Lila also knew this unspoken rule, so she didn't have extravagant thoughts of directly getting Freya's help.
Oh? What do you want?
It's just some Arcanite soul steel.
I see, so you need this.
No problem. I remember I still have about 10 tons of it, Freya said. Just pay me later when your father returns. Freya knew that Bastard had a dimensional merchant channel. Paying back her stock of Arcanite soul steel should be easy. Thank you, Sister Freya.
You are the best.
Although she didn't know precisely how much the Arcanite soul steel needed to create an arcane cannon. A ton should be able to create 1 million of them. 10 tons means 10 million more arcane cannons. With a vast number of soldiers, it's no problem firing these up. Asha and Maya also smiled upon hearing about the news. I just can't bear to see your distressed look, Freya said. As Lila and Freya talked, Lilith fell into confusion. Is Maximus still in the Abyss Realm? Hearing that Maximus still hadn't returned, she became sad for a while. The crowd fell silent as they looked at each other, thinking whether they should tell the truth. As the silence continued, Lilith felt that something was wrong. What happened? Did something happen to Maximus? He disappeared, Freya replied.
What disappeared? How can he disappear?
Looking at her sister, Freya only sighed and told her what happened. After a few minutes of contemplation, Lilith looked at her sister angrily.
Why didn't you tell me earlier?
It had been a few years since Maximus returned, yet her sister kept the news from her. Furthermore, Maximus seemed trapped in some dimension, yet her sister didn't even help. She was still here, lazily training, while the man she loved was in a life-and-death situation. Lilith would have already cried if not for seeing her sister's angry look.
You dare yell at me for a man? So what if I didn't tell you? It's your fault because you are weak. Look, Lila and the others have already reached tier 8.
Then look at you, you're only at a pitiful tier 7. If not for Father's intervention, you would already be sent to the Abyss Realm. But Dash.
Shut up.
Unless you reach tier 8, you are not allowed to leave this domain.
Now, continue training, don't stop until I tell you so.
Although Lilith was still a little aggrieved, looking at her sister, she shrank back and went back to training.
I'm sorry you had to see that.
Freya said apologetically. Don't worry, Sister Freya, we understand. Ha, then it's fine, Freya laughed as her good mood returned. Looking at beautiful things really lifted her mood regardless. Do you want to continue playing here? Lila wanted to play and look at Asha. Unfortunately, Asha still knew her priorities and shook her head. We would want to, but there is still something urgent back home, Asha replied. She also wanted to stay here longer and play. Such a paradise land, it would be a pity not to explore it. Don't worry, you could come again as you like. The whole spirit domain is open to you. Although the spirit domain is such a discriminatory place, it's also the freest land for those who are good-looking. Everything is free, you can do whatever you want like a real paradise. Really, we can return again? Ha, anytime, Freya said, pinching Asha's cheeks. She liked this lively girl. Like Lila, talking to them is such a refreshing experience. Status and the like were discarded like nothing. It seemed that they were equals who could talk about anything. Then we will return again to disturb Sister Freya. I'll also bring my sisters, I'm sure they'll like it here. Sure, you can bring whoever you want. Then it's a promise. Chapter 317 Weapon Transfusion. Soon, Asha and the others returned with over 13 tons of Arcanite soul steel, 3 more tons than initially expected. It seemed that Arcanite soul steel was quite abundant around the soul domain, causing Freya to have a lot in stock. As for the payment, they didn't need to pay. Freya didn't require any money or collateral. Such things were insignificant to her, as she was already as rich as a continent. Furthermore, a mere Arcanite soul steel was just some useless material sitting in her storage. Letting Asha and the others borrow it was nothing. Anyway, their rich father would surely pay for it. After returning to the Moonlight Empire, Asha quickly handed the materials to her mother, Isabel.
So much?
In the past, Maximus had only given them a few tons. Now, seeing over a dozen, Isabella couldn't help but be excited. Unlike Lila's estimate, a ton of Arcanite soul steel could create about 10 million arcane cannons. They only needed a few milligrams of it to create one arcane cannon. This meant that 13 tons of Arcanite steel equated to at least 130 million arcane cannons. Isabella could only imagine the enemy's reaction once these cannons were fired.
So what if they had immortality?
Just one salvo of fire could destroy hundreds of millions of puppets. After a few more seconds, billions could be destroyed. Let's see if they could keep up with the resurrection. Furthermore, even if they could keep up, could the Emperor of the Wessel Empire be willing to waste that amalgamation of will? Sister Freya is quite easy to talk to, so she gave us all her stock. Then we have to thank her later. It's also thanks to Lila. She managed to seduce an apex sovereign, Asha teased. In their short contact with Freya, Asha had already gleaned some of her preferences. To Freya, it seemed that Lila was an addictive drug. Bringing her along guaranteed 100% success in transactions. Lila is indeed the jewel of the Shadowcrest family, we can't do without you. Isabella praised without holding back.
Ha ha ha, Grandma, you flatter me too much.
Lila smiled happily. It's true, you're the most beautiful jewel of the family.
Oh, is that so? What about Sister Asha?
Lila asked provocatively. I'm the most favorite jewel.
So what are you?
Asha quickly retorted, raising her chest.
So what if Lila was the most beautiful?
She was still a generation younger than her. It was only natural that she was the favorite.
Oh, Lila nodded unconsciously, thinking it made sense.
However, her smile faded as she looked at Asha hatefully.
Could you just let me be happy for a while?
Just take it as my reward this time. I don't want to see you smiling, it's too blinding for my eyes.
Hee, does that mean you feel blinded by my beauty?
Lila smiled, thinking that Asha admitted her beauty.
No, shut up.
As Asha and Lila continued to quarrel, Isabella smiled. Looking at them, she felt all her fatigue disappear. You three can go your way, leave the Empire to us.
But we wanted to help more.
No more. There is a more important mission for you to do. You still need to quickly find your father. Staying here is only a waste of time and it's too dangerous on the battlefield. Then we will look for father. Don't worry, we'll bring grandfather to you soon, Grandma. Leave it to us, grandmother. Then I look forward to it. As time passed, billions of puppets continued to inch closer to the Empire. Isabella also took 10 tons of Arcanite soul steel to the Shadowhunter Guild. The Empire still lacked the capability to independently build an arcane cannon. However, as a guild that started with labor, from building the guild headquarters, Tier 9 ship, Empire arrays, etc., the Shadowhunter Guild was professional when it came to mass production. After acquiring all the materials, billions of people quickly got to work, creating over 100 million arcane cannons in just a day. This was still not the full potential of the guild. With hundreds of billions of members, if all of them worked, the task would be finished in less than an hour. If it weren't for the explicit ban or fear of the unknown, Isabella would directly lead these people to the Cursed Continent and crush the Wessel Empire. Unfortunately, the unknown powerhouse hiding in the Cursed Continent was like a sword hanging in the sky. Without her husband, she didn't dare to be arbitrary and provoke such a powerhouse. After obtaining the arcane cannons, Isabella quickly returned to the Moonlight Empire. Summoning Smith, the general of the infantry army numbering over 1 trillion, she gave the arcane cannons.
So many?
Smith muttered in shock. Johnson, who was managing the navy, only had about 25 to 26 million arcane cannons. Yet, looking at the pile in front of him, Smith estimated that there were about 100 million of them. This is necessary, only you have enough people to get this thing started, Isabella said, patting him. Hearing this, Smith fell silent and sighed. Field Marshal, although I'm biased towards my soldiers, I'm afraid I can't take on this task. My soldiers are quite weak, it takes 10 to 100 soldiers to manage an arcane cannon. I lack enough manpower to live up to your task, Smith bowed in shame. His soldiers were really weak. They were spontaneously formed by civilians. With a short amount of training, most of them were only at Tier 4, with a few reaching Tier 5. Indeed, this is a problem. How about recruiting more? Anyway, they would not be fighting on the front line. Even Tier 3 individuals would do, just so they can load the arcane cannons. Then I'll do my best to quickly live up to your expectations. Coincidentally, quite a few people in the Empire were eager to join the army. Protecting their empire, the home that they were in, had always been a glorious task. Joining the army at this time proved that they were worthy of living in the Moonlight Empire. If not for their weak strength, they would have already flown and fought with the enemy. Smith quickly opened a recruitment task. With the convenience of the Moonlight token, the people in the Empire quickly received the news. Recruitment notice? There's still a recruitment notice? Wow, even a tier 3 trash like myself is qualified? Damn, I've long wanted to fight those barbarians.
How dare they attack us?
Now it's better, we can finally join the army and protect our land. After a few taps, reading the recruitment notice, most people quickly registered. However, a huge exclamation mark was presented to most of them. Not enough battle points. Please proceed to the Battle Coliseum and accumulate 10,000 points. Huh, there's still a requirement? The Battle Coliseum is the most popular virtual app in the Moonlight Empire. In the past, it was only about fighting a virtual entity and measuring combat power. However, as time passed, it continued to be updated. Now it possessed PvP, PvE, various team battles, battle royales, all kinds of terrain selection, and more. If this continues, it might even be possible to build it into a complete virtual world. As for battle points, they are universal points that could buy anything in the Empire. Unique resources, secret knowledge, land, even a noble title can be bought. It can be said that battle points are the measure of strength and status in the Moonlight Empire. Thus, seeing the requirement, most of them felt it was natural. Time to grind in the Battle Coliseum, who's with me?
Let's join in and bully some newbies.
Ha ha ha, all of us are newbies, those strong players are already at the front line fighting. Then it's easier, let's quickly accumulate points and protect our land.
For the Moonlight Empire.
For the Moonlight Empire. While Smith was recruiting soldiers, Isabella went to Johnson.
What is it, Field Marshal?
Additional weapons, Isabella said, giving him a storage ring.
Huh? Arcane cannons?
Johnson estimated that there were at least 30 million arcane cannons in the storage ring. With what he originally had, there were over 50 million arcane cannons in total. With the current number of his soldiers, it was just at saturation point. Not too much, not too little. More importantly, with this, he could better cope with the enemy. These days he hadn't even had a wink, staring intently at the enemy. Seeing them getting closer and closer, Johnson felt as if someone was gripping his heart. Now, with tens of millions more arcane cannons, the smile on his lips was uncontrollable.
Thank you, Field Marshal.
This is really a timely reinforcement, giving the Moonlight Empire a blood transfusion. No, I and the people of the Moonlight Empire should thank you. Without you holding the front, we would even have peace of mind. Ha ha ha, you flatter me, Field Marshal.
Don't worry, leave everything here to me.
I promise to make these puppets retreat to where they came from. Then I hope for your success. Chapter 318 War Stalemate. With over 30 million additional arcane cannons, Johnson quickly restructured the army and armed them with the additional arcane cannons. Previously, there were 2 shifts of soldiers, ensuring they wouldn't accumulate fatigue. Although there was a miracle food that removed their fatigue and restored their spirit and will. Long-term exhaustion recovery cycles in a short period of time were detrimental to the potential of an individual. In the worst case, they could even die. After all, this is forcing the body against the rules of the world, and anything against it will suffer sooner or later. Unfortunately, with more weapons now, resting is no longer possible. They all had to work, no matter the consequences, they had to get up and fight. The soldiers also understand this. They needed to protect their land. If it meant they had to exchange their life, they would do it without second thoughts. Picking up the newly set weapons, they resolutely filled them with mana, waiting for the general's instructions. Looking at the enemy about 50,000 kilometers away from them, a smile arced on their lips. With additional weapons in their hands, their originally wavering confidence returned. Even if they died as a result of overwork, they didn't care. Protecting their home was more important than their lives. Their wives, children, and property were in the Empire. Once it was destroyed, it was equivalent to death regardless.
Ready and aim.
Johnson ordered over the intercom.
Fire.
Like a grand celebration, the sky lit up brighter than ever, sending a death signal to the enemy. Boom! A defining sound followed, akin to a heavenly note played in their ears.
Fire.
Without waiting for the smoke to subside, Johnson ordered the arcane cannons to be fired again. Boom!
Fire. 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 Like a symphony, explosions after explosions bombarded the enemy as if there were no tomorrow. Johnson, who was looking at the status of the enemy puppets, smiled. Ha ha ha, it looks like you can't keep up with the resurrection now. Looking above, the enemy decreased visibly to the naked eye. Each second, the arcane cannons took the lives of almost 100 million puppets. Moreover, according to his estimate, the enemy resurrected only about 10 million per second. If this continued, sooner or later, the enemy would be wiped out. Meanwhile, in the enemy camp, panic ensued as they received various reports of the status of the puppet army. What happened? How could there be more arcane cannons? 30 million more. Who in the world has that many arcane cannons? Have you checked who they bought them from? The Moonlight Empire didn't simply double their firepower, they directly pushed them to despair. Although it might not seem like it, tens of millions of arcane cannons are insane. The materials used for this weapon of war are so rare that no one dared to waste them. After all, even if the arcane cannon reached Tier 9, without hitting the target, they're useless. Even for them, if they are careful, the threat of the arcane cannon is nothing. If that is so, it's better to build a personal or at least an automatic weapon. Although it's more expensive to build and use, at least it will have some threat to them. They wondered who was crazy enough to build tens of millions of arcane cannons and give them to the Moonlight Empire. This is not our problem. No matter where they got the materials for the arcane cannons, there is nothing we can do about it. Our problem right now is how do we proceed with this? Sooner or later, the puppets would run out. How about we call His Majesty? He should be able to solve the resurrection efficiency of the puppets. Now that they are already this desperate, the only person they can think of is Khan. They also wanted to fight, but looking at the domineering Berserk Legion always looming over them, they didn't dare. What they planned was to have the puppets assist them in battle, overcoming the enemy with pure quantity. However, with the puppets dying, not even passing the first barrier of the Moonlight Empire, they couldn't help but despair. Antonio, the commander of the puppet army, looked at this coldly, as if it was expected. Antonio already knew that the Moonlight Empire was a bottomless pit. When you feel that you're close to the ground, another hole would be dug out, giving you despair. After experiencing this for a few years, he was already numb. Thus, even hearing them ask for the Emperor of Wessel Empire for help, he just shook his head. What do you mean, Antonio? Why are you shaking your head? They look at Antonio like it was all his fault this happened. As the main commander controlling the puppet army, Antonio should be the one to quickly think of a solution. Yet looking at him silent as if mute, they felt a bit dissatisfied. Nothing, it's merely because you forgot the root problem. What root problem? It's the arcane cannons. Arcane cannons? What about them? Who knows if these are all the arcane cannons that the Moonlight Empire had? What if there are 100 million, a billion, or even a trillion more arcane cannons hidden there? Furthermore, are the arcane cannons our only problem? The Berserk Legions and the Imperial soldiers that ambushed us last time, is that all there is? Is there a stronger legion, an army hidden that we didn't know of? No, we know nothing. This is a pointless war, a battle of consumption. Without absolute power to dominate the battlefield, the winner may not emerge in tens, hundreds, or even thousands of years. As Antonio enumerated all kinds of facts, the crowd fell silent. Fighting the Moonlight Empire up until this point had been smooth. They even celebrated as if victory was in sight. Who knew the next day they would face despair? The enemy had too many unknowns that they felt they were fighting in the dark. Yesterday they were winning, the next day they were losing. They were only mere cannon fodder at this point. A weak helpless being that couldn't affect the war and could only stall the enemy. Then should we call His Majesty directly? I'm sure with his strength no enemy is a match for us. Suddenly one of them spoke, suggesting an idea. What do you think, Divine Priest? Me? Lut was speechless as the question was directed at him. How dare he call the Emperor of the Wessel Empire directly? Isn't that suicide? Teaching an emperor what to do is equivalent to death. What about you, Antonio? Do you have any ideas? Lut didn't answer the question and passed it back. I don't care. I'll hold off here as long as I can. The rest is up to you, bunch of trash, Antonio said coldly, exiting the room. He and his subordinates had been the only ones doing the work. Now the blame is still passed on to him. They can go to hell as they want. Antonio would rather accept the punishment of his god than deal with these trashes. Looking at the back of Antonio, they felt mixed emotions. There is anger, resentment, shame, and unwillingness. Having no one amongst them to stand up at a critical moment made them feel useless. It had all been the believers of the god of puppet who was doing the work. They, the believers of the god of shadow, god of gambling and god of thieves, simply did nothing and sit around. But what could they do? They were simply cannon fodder forcefully promoted by their god. Against those insane Tier 8 armies and legions, they didn't even qualify as cannon fodder. Lut, seeing this, just shook his head. What a bunch of brainwashed believers who can't think on their own. He thought. Just report what happened here to His Majesty. As for what happens next. Lut didn't mention the following words, but they understood. Soon one of them reported everything to the Emperor of the Wessel Empire. Meanwhile, after Antonio came back to the puppet command center, he ordered his subordinates to disperse the puppets. He also halted their advancement, waiting for the follow-up command. Soon after a few hours, the battlefield came to a stalemate. With dispersed puppets, the arcane cannon lethality plummeted, giving time for the resurrection of other puppets. Seeing this, he heaved a sigh of relief. Now he only needed to wait until this was over. The war had really caused him too much stress. In the Wessel Empire, Khan looked over the report and frowned. Although he already expected that the Moonlight Empire still had some trump cards, he didn't expect it to be this severe. Even if he used more amalgamation of will to hasten the resurrection time of the puppets, it wouldn't help much. The fundamental difference between the two empires needed to be decided by the top powers of both sides. He felt that even if he increased his investment in the amalgamation of will, the Moonlight Empire would respond with more arcane cannons. Without his personal participation, the war could only lead to a stalemate until one side was exhausted. Unfortunately, the memories still kept coming like an alarm clock disrupting him. If he fought in this condition, he might die without even knowing. Fortunately, as time passed, he felt that this experience wouldn't last long. The memory was coming into pieces, it was beginning to make sense to him. A few more months to a year and his suffering would end. After that, it would be time for the Moonlight Empire to witness his power. Just wait until this is over. Chapter 319 The Last Stand. As time passed, the war continued to remain in a stalemate. With Khan's acquiescence, they didn't need to do anything and only stall for time. Knowing this, Antonio heaved a sigh of relief, doing all he could to stall the Moonlight Empire. Unfortunately for them, the Moonlight Empire is ready for the kill. While they were stalling for time, army recruitment was progressing all over the empire. Billions of people were recruited and trained every day. People working hard to earn 10,000 battle points to be eligible for the army. The newly recruited army trained to follow commands and the specifics. Soon a few months passed, 2 years since Maximus disappeared. The army enlistment was over, after recruiting over 30 trillion people. With less than 100 trillion of population, it could be said that over 50% of the people in the empire joined the war. What was left were civilians and children who were too weak or hadn't reached the Tier 3 realm. This war was also their last stand. If they couldn't still defeat the enemy, it would be over. Perhaps only the missing omnipotent mighty emperor can save them once this happened. In the wide open space of the ascending land, on the border of the Moonlight Empire, trillions of people lay low as they listened to Field Marshal Isabella mobilize their morale. Throughout all these years, we are the only ones being attacked. Year after year, they continue to provoke us. They treated us as pigs locked up in a cage who can't do anything but defend. Like a monkey that could entertain them. Are you angry? We are angry. Do you hate them? We hate them. Then, pick up the cannons, bring out your strength and will. With your participation, it's time for the Wessel Empire to feel our wrath. Today, we will bring forth an end to this war. A wave of cheer erupted as they felt their blood boiling. Holding their cannons, feeding them with their strength, they looked far away, eager to crush the enemy. Death to the Wessel Empire! Death to the Wessel Empire! For the Moonlight Empire! For the Moonlight Empire! Destroy the enemy! Destroy! At the front line. After the mobilization, Johnson quickly ordered the army to retreat. Seeing this, the enemy was a little puzzled. Huh? Why are they retreating? Is this a conspiracy or something? Do we follow them? What do you think, Commander? Antonio also fell into deep thought, considering whether they should follow the enemy or stay in place. Let's stay here, it might be a trap, Antonio finally decided. As he saw the enemy retreat, he felt the threat of death. Antonio was sure that once he followed, hell would break loose. Anyway, they only needed to stall for time until the Emperor was prepared. Getting back to his cabin, Antonio still felt uneasy. The gloom in his heart didn't seem to dissipate, as his heart thumped wildly. Couldn't it be the god of death? Antonio muttered, remembering the man who killed him in silence. Oh? You're quite keen, Nathan, who was hidden in the shadows, appeared.
It's you?
Antonio shouted as his body trembled in fear. Indeed, it's me, surprise? I dash. Inuk chitchet, d. Nathan said coldly, ending his life. Antonio didn't seem to notice his life passing away as his eyes still widened with his head falling off. Looking at the dead body, Nathan clicked his tongue. This time, Nathan used his power of law in conjunction with his physique to kill Antonio. Unless Khan invested heavily, Antonio would forever fall into darkness. 5 more to go. Nathan quickly shuttled around the ship like it was his home, finding all the backup commanders. With the key information from Neo, Nathan quickly found his target. Soon, all the people who could quickly take over the puppet army welcomed their death kiss. Meanwhile, in the puppet control center. As soon as Antonio died, an emergency protocol was quickly prompted. The commander is dead. What? An enemy ambush. Not good, we've lost the key control to the puppets. Call the other commanders. Earlier, because of Antonio's death, the puppets didn't activate, rendering them useless. Thus, a few backup commanders were set up to quickly take over control of the puppet army in case of emergency. However, as seconds and minutes passed after calling the backup commanders, the only thing they received was silence. Could it be that they're also dead? Dead? It's over. No, we still have a choice. Whether to disable the puppet army or push them out to the enemy. That's right, there's still this option. Anticipating this event, before Antonio's death, he set out the command do or die to the puppet army. The remaining personnel on board could choose one of the 2 commands depending on the status of the battle. Whether to do, which meant fight the enemy to death, or die, wait for the follow-up reinforcement and wait for death. Thinking of the last command of their commander, they couldn't help but hesitate. Should we leave the puppet army be or attack? Do you think we have a choice? No. The enemy could kill us at any moment. Instead of dying like this, it's better to die fighting. Even if it's the last thing we do, we must let these bastards know the power of our god. For the glory of the puppet god. After operating the puppet army, the puppets' mechanical eyes went red and went berserk. The control command also lost control over them. Now unless the puppets get destroyed, they would destroy everything in their path. Looking at this, Nathan couldn't help but nod. Since you're so obedient, I'll let you die peacefully, Nathan thought as he brandished his blade. Soon, blood flowed in the room as they witnessed the heads of their comrades fall one after another. The D-Devil. In other ships? Noticing that the enemy retreated, there was a puzzled expression on the faces of the believers. What happened? Could the Moonlight Empire brewing some conspiracy? Seeing the puppet army stop at the front, they also halted. Just what happened? The believers asked one after another, using their means to ascertain the reason for the Moonlight Empire's retreat. However, after their search, there seemed to be no problem. The battle was still in a stalemate, neither side could win each other. Furthermore, if you look closely, it's obvious that the Moonlight Empire is winning slowly. Yet in the blink of an eye, they retreated suddenly. Could it be that they're exhausted? After all, firing the arcane cannon is not just about mana. The accumulated fatigue and stress have various consequences that not even a Tier 9 elixir can cure. Maybe, anyway, let's follow the puppets. If there is something wrong, we could still escape. Not finding anything wrong and seeing the puppet army advance again, they followed unconsciously. Getting close to the Moonlight Empire was their main goal. Once they were on the land, those hateful army legions wouldn't be able to use their heavenly formation unscrupulously. It was so destructive that it could harm a tenth of their land if they were not careful. Judging by the attitude of the inhabitants of the Moonlight Empire, destroying their land just to defeat the enemy is a losing situation. As they got closer and closer to the Moonlight Empire, they didn't notice that the ships controlling the puppets stopped moving. They were still leisurely, thinking that it was their time to finally fight. However, Divine Priest Lut had a bad premonition. He felt his heart getting tighter and tighter as they were entering the mouth of a beast. Just as he was about to speak and warn the others, the sky lit up, overshadowing everything like a signal to an apocalypse. Boom! The shock wave made the sea shake, forming tsunamis and wormholes. Not having the chance to utter another word, another explosion was heard. Boom! No, it's a trap! Each second, explosions were heard, like a hammer beating their hearts. The puppet army was like a locust against a fire. Despite hundreds of millions of casualties, they didn't retreat. Where is Antonio? Make the puppet retreat. At this point, the puppets could only last a few seconds. Billions of puppets will be pulverized when bombarded to this degree. Looking up, the sky seemed to be raining fire of destruction. Not good, Antonio can't be contacted. This? What about the others? They can't be contacted either. Furthermore, the commanding ship doesn't seem to be with us. Damn. What a conspiracy. What a cunning moonlight empire. Just what evil method did they use? Now that we are close to the land, let's fight. His Majesty is with us, we are immortal. That's right, we are immortal. Suddenly, they seemed to be enlightened. The fear in their hearts dissipated, replaced by confidence, overwhelming confidence. They seemed to be omnipotent beings who could destroy everything in their path. Since the puppets were useless, then it's time for us to prove our strength. Chapter 320 Last Stand 2. With no other choice, they can only fight. Escaping is not possible. Looking behind, the Imperial Legion that killed them earlier was already stationed. Their only choice is to cause a rampage that the Moonlight Empire wouldn't dare stop them from leaving. Soon, hundreds of thousands of Tier 8 believers flew towards the enemy regardless of life and death. Seeing the arcane cannons aiming towards them, they just sneered. Too slow. Maneuvering around, they dodged the array of bombardment by a hair's breadth. Soon, another array of fire was aimed at them. This time it was more concentrated, not giving them time to dodge. Boom! Flesh and blood splattered, killing them in an instant. Tens of thousands of believers dyed the sky red with their blood. However, a few seconds later, they quickly resurrected as if nothing had happened. Still alive. The divine protection of His Majesty is still with us. Do not fear death, destroy the enemy. Kill. Witnessing the miraculous power of resurrection, death seemed to be removed from their minds. As long as they could destroy the enemy, it was a win. Finally, after a few deaths, they passed the enemy bombardment area. Looking at the soldiers in front of them, there was a smirk on their lips full of killing intent. Hee, it's your turn to feel death. Although they could be resurrected each time without fail, the pain they felt was as real as it could be. Feeling their flesh explode into pieces and their souls burn like hell, the killing intent in their hearts magnified. They wanted to torture these people. Let them feel what they felt. Let them know why one would want to die rather than continue to feel pain. However, before they could enact their plan, the Berserk Legion began to move. You wouldn't have a chance to do this. Rose muttered emotionlessly. Damn woman, just try to kill us. They didn't care anymore. After a few deaths, they were already numb. What more could the enemy do to them? Kill them. With immortality, they could make countless mistakes, but only needed to kill one to secure victory. Not fearing anything, they quickly flew up and fought the Berserk Legion without scruples. Looking at this, the 1,000 Berserk Legion soldiers smiled as if looking at prey. Battle formation. Rose commanded. Different from Isabella's legion, the Berserk Legion formation didn't combine many into one. It magnified their individualism, worthy of a Berserk warrior. Clenching their heavy weapons like hammers, great swords, giant staffs, etc., they felt power coursing through their bodies. Equipped with armor covering their whole body, a blood-red aura began to spread as they resembled soldiers from hell. Kill! Like an order from the god of death, the Berserk Legion moved. As the enemy came into their range, they twisted their bodies, hammering the person before them with their weapons. Thud! A dull sound resonated, splattering the enemy like mosquitoes. Huh? A rhythmic breath sounded as they retracted their weapons, waiting for the next prey. Looking at the enemy who had unconsciously stopped, they licked their lips. Not enough. More. Eager for blood, the Berserk Legion flew toward the enemy. Like demons, each attack splattered the blood of the enemy everywhere. Thud. 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 In just a few minutes, hundreds of thousands of believers were wiped out. The sky reddened as the blood of the enemy fell slowly like clouds and rain. Each second they resurrected, a Berserk Legion soldier would quickly solve it. Like playing whack-a-mole, the believers who had gone crazy grew numb. This was not a battle at all, this was a massacre. A massacre between a god and mortals. Each time they resurrected, a bloody hammer or sword would greet them like the sun. Many times they didn't want to resurrect. The pain of their bodies smashed like a pile of meat hurt more than the arcane cannons. Every time, they felt their bodies crumple one by one until they returned to darkness. Meanwhile, the puppet army also disappeared, clearing the sea. Every second, as 10 million puppets were resurrected, an arcane cannon would lock onto the play, destroying the enemy. Lut, who escaped at the first notice, witnessed all the massacres and trembled for his life. Looking at the other believers being tortured repeatedly, his will to fight already dissipated. Once I come back, I will never return to this damn place. Disregarding the ship, he quickly swam through the sea. With the chaotic property of the sea, the deeper he went the less the chance of anyone finding him. Although it's a bit dangerous, it's safer than flying through the sky. Unfortunately for him, if fate wanted him to die, he would die. Above, Nathan already locked him before he even got out of the ship. As the man who survived his sword, how could Nathan let him get away easily? This time, no matter what protection you have, you will die. Lut seemed to have heard it and looked up. It's you? Lut shouted in despair. Nice to meet you and goodbye, Nathan smiled slightly. With a swoosh, Lut only saw a knife coming down to his neck before he was swallowed by darkness. Deep in his mind, he was puzzled as to why the protection amulet given by his god didn't work. This tier 9 weapon is indeed insane, Nathan muttered, admiring the knife in his hand like a piece of art. A tier 9 dimensional weapon gifted by his father that could disregard any defense and slash through everything. Coupled with his physique that could kill anyone as long as he triggered the mark of death. It was basically sure death if he could hit his opponent, no matter the tier. Unfortunately, it consumed too much. This weapon was a one-shot wonder. Just one strike consumed all his power of law and mana. If not for his solid foundation and mana almost comparable to that of an apex sovereign, he couldn't even use this weapon. Done with his task, he quickly teleported back to the Empire. In the Wessel Empire. Khan quickly noticed the spike of amalgamation of will being consumed. If previously it was 1, now it quickly reached 1,000. Deploying the amalgamation of will, he investigated what happened. Huh? What in the world? Looking at his soldiers being refreshed and killed like mobs, Khan frowned. After a bit of watching, he quickly analyzed what happened. What overwhelming firepower! What astonishing combat technique! There is only one thing, the Moonlight Empire is insanely strong. What dissatisfied him more is that those useless believers. They couldn't even last a few minutes under a legion of the Moonlight Empire. Those gods really didn't take him seriously and only sent a few cannon fodder. Like a beggar, those gods only gave him a few coins to satisfy their vanity. Just a few more months, Khan shook his head in pity. Just a few more months, and he could fully piece the memory coming to his mind. Unfortunately, these weaklings couldn't even last a few months. TSK, it seems I need to spend more. Mobilizing a huge quantity of amalgamation of will. He turned his attention towards the Moonlight Empire. Time to fight. In the Moonlight Empire. As the soldiers rested, celebrating their victory the clouds suddenly changed color as a cold aura descended from the sky, sending shivers down their spines. This? Before they could react, billions of puppets resurrected simultaneously. Is it round 2? Seeing that the enemy only resurrected and nothing happened to them, their nervousness disappeared. Standing from their positions, they quickly aimed the arcane cannons at the enemy. Fire! With an order, the sky lit up again. Boom! Seeing the puppets fall into the sea, the smiles on their faces widened. Is that it? So what if you can be resurrected? Just a few more salvos and you're finished. As the fire bombardment continued, they noticed something wrong. Earlier, after a few salvos, the enemy quickly decreased visible to the naked eye. However, looking at it now, not only did the enemy not decrease, but it was even getting closer and closer to them. No, something is wrong. What should we do? Relax, continue to fire, just obey orders, the captain said. Although he also didn't know what was wrong, what he knew was that it was not time to panic. The soldiers were also rigorously trained and quickly calmed down. Regardless of whether the enemy decreased, increased, or whatever, they just needed to fire and fire. They could only stop unless ordered to do so.
In the command room, Isabella and the others analyzed the new movement of the enemy. It seems that the Emperor of the Wessel Empire is really willing to invest, Johnson muttered helplessly.
Heh, this means that's all he could do.
Otherwise, why waste such a huge amount of energy just to stall us? Resurrecting the puppets costs energy. If this continued, the amalgamation of will possessed by the Emperor of the Wessel Empire might be depleted.
In this case, then continue.
Without enough amalgamation of will, the Emperor of the Wessel Empire is a mere paper tiger.